Hi everyone, how are you? If you're from Facebook or TikTok, the timing for you to watch the rest of the story will be down below. E se você é here from YouTube, welcome to our channel. Enjoy, subscribe to our channel too so you don't miss any more stories. E let's enjoy the story.
The world's richest man sent my family a $10 billion ring and announced that he would marry whichever woman it fit. The problem was that all four of us had already married him in previous lives, and he had rejected every one of us. In our first life, Serafina secretly resized the ring and claimed it. On their wedding night, Alistair Sterling cast her out until she felt unrecognizable, screaming, "You're not her." The family had blamed Serafina's greed and convinced ourselves that Alistair's rage had been an exception. Her exile frightened us, but it did not stop the next woman from imagining she could become the bride he wanted. In our second life, Lily reshaped herself until the ring finally slid onto her finger. He cast her aside almost the moment the vows were spoken. By then, we understood the ring was cursed, and yet wealth and the fear of losing everything had made us merciless toward each other. We treated Lily's banishment as proof that she had forced the fit, rather than asking why Alistair had examined her hand so closely, married her in front of witnesses, and only decided she was the wrong woman once the wedding night had already begun. In our third life, my stepmother Meredith concealed the flaws in her own finger long enough to force the ring on. He locked her in a bedroom and left her there. Each lifetime ended in a different exile, but always the same accusation. He never once asked where his true beloved had been before the ceremony. He accepted. The bride standing before him completed the wedding, and only afterward became something monstrous, as if the marriage itself woke a memory none of us could see. In our fourth life, the family pushed me forward, and the ring fit me perfectly. I had been secretly seeing Alistair, and he had ordered the ring made to my exact measurements, so I let myself believe the nightmare was finally over. Instead, he scorned me just as violently as he had scorned the others. "How dare you take her place?" he roared, while I wept beneath him. "Where is she now?" Now we had returned for one final life, and none of us would touch the ring. In every previous life, the rest of the family had watched a single woman claim it and assumed her suffering would end the curse. This time, we remembered all four losses at once. Rivalry dissolved because none of us could survive making the wrong choice. Again. Alistair's secretary studied our frightened faces. Mr. Sterling was very clear. The owner of this ring is one of the four ladies of the Ashwood family. Serafina stepped back immediately. "I'm allergic to diamonds." Lily hid her hands behind her back. "My fingers would break it." Meredith clutched her late husband's portrait and swore she would never remarry. Then every eye in the room turned to me. The secretary smiled. "Miss Ashwood, Mr. Sterling fell in love with you at first sight, didn't he? Surely the ring belongs to you." Love at first sight. That was what I had believed, right up until Alistair turned our wedding chamber into a prison of isolation. I refused to touch the box. The secretary's smile cooled instantly. "Mr. Sterling will come in person tomorrow. You have one night to decide." After he left, the four of us stood staring at the diamond as though it were a lit fuse. No one suggested drawing lots. No one so much as nudged the box across the table. Even Serafina, who had once altered the ring with her own hands to steal a billionaire husband, kept both palms pressed behind her back. For the first time in years, the women who had tormented me were my allies. We all remembered exile. We all understood that presenting the wrong bride would be catastrophic. "The gala," I said suddenly. "That's supposedly where he first saw his beloved. There has to be security footage." We rushed back to the hotel that same night. On the recording, our family sat alone at a table in the far corner. No one else had approached us, because the four of us could barely stand one another's company. Then Alistair entered the frame. As he passed our table, he stopped and turned. His eyes landed directly on us, and a tender, unguarded smile spread across his face. As he leaned toward his secretary, there was no fifth woman, no hidden guest waiting in the wings. His beloved really was one of us. "Then why did he destroy every bride?" Lily whispered. No one had an answer. I could think of only one way to find out. That night, I used the private entrance to Alistair's mansion, the one we had always used for our secret meetings. He looked startled when I stepped into his study, but his expression softened almost instantly. You should have called. The man in front of me looked nothing like the monster who had shattered me on our wedding night. I forced myself closer. The woman you intend to marry. Is it me? We've been together a long time, he said. I sent the ring to ask for my beloved's hand. You already know my heart. He pulled me onto his lap, but he still hadn't answered the question. His study was full of things he had given me. During our secret relationship, books I had only mentioned once, a scarf in the exact shade I favored, the teacup I always used when we met in private. No stranger could have prepared a room like this, and yet none of it explained why the man who remembered my smallest preferences had looked straight through me on our wedding night and demanded to know where another woman was. Either Alistair was lying to me now, or something happened after the vows that erased the person he believed I was. Both possibilities made tomorrow's wedding a trap. Who is your beloved Alistair? His eyes flickered. Why are you asking a question you already know the answer to? Then he smiled. Of course it's you, Ara. As long as you want it to be you, it will be. Marry me tomorrow and I'll treat you well. As long as I wanted it to be me, not because it was. Part 2. Alistair had pursued me, relentlessly once. He had shielded me from my own family, given me gifts they could never have afforded, cooked for me with his own hands, even knelt to tie my shoes when I twisted my ankle at a garden party. Before my last exile, I had never once doubted that he loved me, but I could still hear the words he had spat at me as he cast me out. You were only a toy. How dare you replace her? Alistair lifted my hand and pressed a kiss to my knuckles. That small, tender gesture sparked a terrifying thought in my mind. Your beloved is... He pressed a finger to my lips before I could finish. For one instant, something dangerous flashed behind his eyes. You're asking too many questions tonight. Go home, Alara. Tomorrow is our wedding. I obeyed. The others surrounded me the moment I returned. Did you learn who she is? I looked down at the ring resting on the table. If Serafina wore it, she would be driven far from everything she knew. If Lily wore it, she would flee from her own estate in terror. If Meredith wore it, she would break entirely. And if I wore it, Alistair would humiliate me loudly enough to ensure I felt every last sting of it. I slid the ring onto my finger. I'll marry him. The three women stared at me as though I had lost my mind. Have you lost your senses? Serafina demanded. We all saw what he did to you. This is the only chance we have, I said, to learn the truth and keep all four of us whole. Attend the wedding. Act as though you know nothing. They pressed me for an explanation, and I gave them only part of it. His beloved is one of us, I said, and I believe it's me. Their objections came at once, tumbling over each other. If Alistair loved me, why had he rejected me before? Why had he accused me of replacing someone else entirely? I could not tell them the rest of my theory. Not yet. I barely trusted it myself. The next morning, Alistair arrived to collect his bride. When he saw the ring gleaming on my finger, his face filled with something close to worship. He did not inspect the fit. He did not ask whether anyone had resized it in secret. He simply took my hand as though he recognized exactly where the diamond belonged, and that certainty terrified me more than any accusation could have. The wedding was grander than anything from our 4 previous lives combined. We walked down the aisle beneath veils of white silk. Alistair spoke his vows with such raw sincerity that even my own family began to doubt their memories of him. When he lifted my veil at last, he smiled at me the way a man smiles when he has finally found what he spent his whole life searching for. This ring belongs to you, he whispered. It was made for you. Every detail of that day confirmed that he loved me. Every memory I carried confirmed that he would destroy me for it. I played the devoted bride through the toasts, the dancing, the long parade of well-wishers, and I waited for the night to come. When the last guest finally left, I walked into our bridal suite alone. A legal document lay on the table beside a peeled apple, its flesh already browning at the edges. In my previous life, that same paper had been hidden beneath the mattress. Tonight it sat in plain view, and moving it would change nothing. If my theory was correct, I needed him to relive the horror exactly as he had before. Any deviation might hide the truth forever. The servants withdrew one by one until the suite was silent. Then footsteps approached in the corridor. The door opened. Alistair looked at me, and the love drained out of his face in an instant. Something else rose in its place, something closer to madness. "You are not her," he snarled. "How dare you marry me in her place?" He seized the legal paper off the table and lunged toward me. I did not run. I had rehearsed this exact moment 100 times in my mind during the carriage ride from the chapel to the estate. I had rehearsed it while the maids pinned white flowers into my hair. I had rehearsed it while Alistair kissed my knuckles at the altar and called me irreplaceable in front of 200 watching guests. So when the knife came toward me, I did not scream. "Wait," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Before you finish this, look at me. Really, look." Something in my tone made him hesitate. The blade stopped inches from my throat, trembling in his grip. His eyes, wild only a heartbeat ago, flickered with confusion, as though a second consciousness had briefly surfaced beneath the rage. "You keep saying I'm not her," I continued, forcing my voice not to shake. "But you never tell me who she is. You never once described her face, her voice, anything. You just wait until the vows are spoken, and then you decide I've failed some test I never saw." "You don't understand," he rasped, the knife still hovering. "She's been taken from me. Every time. Every single time I marry, she disappears, and a stranger wears her face instead." The room went cold around me. Every time. He remembered. Somewhere beneath the fury and the grief, some fractured part of Alistair Sterling carried the memory of every wedding night across every lifetime. And in his mind, each of us had been an imposter stealing a place that belonged to someone else. "What if there was never a stranger?" I asked quietly. "What if the woman you're mourning is standing in front of you right now, and something happens the moment the vows are finished that makes you forget her?" The knife lowered a fraction. For the first time since he had entered the room, Alistair truly looked at me. Not at a bride, not at an imposter, but at me. "That's impossible," he whispered, though the certainty had gone out of his voice. "Is it?" I reached up, slowly, and closed my hand over his, guiding the blade down and away from my throat. "You called me irreplaceable this afternoon. You meant it. I watched your face when you said it. That wasn't a lie. So tell Alistair, what changes between the altar and the bedroom? What is it that steals her from you every single time?" He stared at me for a long moment, his chest heaving, the legal paper crumpled in his other fist. And then, for the first time in 5 lifetimes, instead of screaming that I wasn't her, he asked a question of his own. "Alara, is that truly you?" Parte final. I froze. He had never once said my name like that before, not with accusation, not with grief, but with the fragile disbelief of a man waking from a nightmare he'd lived through 5 times over. "It's me," I said, carefully. "It's always been me, Alistair, in every life." He staggered back as though the words had struck him. The knife slipped from his fingers and clattered against the floor. He pressed both hands to his temples, and for the first time I saw not a monster, but a man in genuine agony, fighting something inside his own skull. "Then who?" he gasped. "Who is the one I keep losing? I see her face so clearly right up until the vows are spoken, and then it's gone. It's always gone, and there's a stranger standing where she was." "There was never a stranger," I said, stepping toward him, instead of away, though every instinct screamed at me to run. "I think something happens to your memory the moment the marriage becomes real. I think you're not losing her. I think you're losing me, over and over, and mistaking the loss for a substitution." He shook his head violently, but his eyes had lost their wildness. Now they held only desperate confusion. "There has to be a reason. There has to be someone doing this to us." That single word, us, was the crack I needed. I thought of the ring, resized 4 separate times across 4 separate lives, always by different hands, always fitting a different woman just before disaster struck. I thought of the legal document on the table, hidden beneath a mattress in one life and left in plain sight in this one, as though someone wanted it found on the wedding night specifically. "Alistair, who gave you this ring originally? Not commissioned. Gave you." Before any of this began, his breathing slowed. He turned toward the window, toward the dark shape of the east wing where, I now remembered, his late mother's rooms had stood sealed and untouched since before I'd first met him. "My mother," he said slowly, as though dragging, the memory up from some place he'd buried it. "She said it would find her granddaughter-in-law. She said the ring would know. And what happened to your mother? She died the week before my first wedding." His voice had gone hollow. "I was told it was her heart. I never questioned it. I never had reason to. I felt the pieces align with a coldness that ran straight through me. A ring said to choose a bride. A wedding night that erased a groom's memory of love, replacing it with rage and the certainty of betrayal. A mother who died at the exact threshold of the first ceremony, and who had never been mentioned again in 5 lives. By anyone. Not the family, not the staff, not Alistair himself, until tonight. I don't think this ring was ever a gift," I said quietly. "I think it's a curse laid on this house, and I think it's been feeding on every wedding you've ever had. Something in this house doesn't want you married. Something replaces your memory of loving your bride with a memory of losing someone else, someone who never existed at all." Alistair's hands were shaking now, but not with rage. "If that's true, then how do we stop it? I've done this 4 times already. 4 times I've destroyed someone who loved me, and I never even understood I was the one doing the destroying." I looked at the ring on my own hand, the diamond catching lamplight the way it must have caught it in every life before mine. Because this time, none of us hid anything from each other. Because this time, I walked in here already knowing what you'd become at midnight, and I stayed anyway. Maybe that's what the curse never accounted for. A bride who wasn't surprised. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me against him, not with the desperate hunger of a man reclaiming a stolen bride, but with the trembling relief of someone finally waking from a fever. "I remember now," he whispered against my hair. "I remember all of them. Seraphina's kindness before I broke her. Lily's laugh. Meredith's patience with a stepdaughter who wasn't even hers by blood. And you, Alara. I remember loving you before any ring ever touched your finger. We spent what remained of that night not in the bridal bed, but in his mother's sealed rooms, prying open drawers that hadn't been touched in years. We found her journals, brittle and yellowed, describing a pact made generations before. Alistair was born, a bargain struck by a sterling ancestor for wealth beyond measure, paid for in the happiness of every bride who would ever wear that ring. His mother had known. She had tried in her final year to break it, and the house had taken her before she could finish. By dawn, Alistair and I stood together at the edge of the estate's old well, the same one, his mother's journal revealed, where the original bargain had been sealed, and dropped the ring into its black depths. I don't know if it was truly finished in that moment, or if some larger reckoning still waited. For us. But when the sun rose over Ashwood, Alistair looked at me the way he had looked at me across a crowded gala in a life I could barely remember anymore, and there was no madness in it. Only recognition. Seraphina, Lily, and Meredith found us there at sunrise, and for the first time in 5 lifetimes, none of us flinched from one another. We had entered that house as rivals competing for a single doomed prize. We left it, whatever came next, as 4 women who had finally broken the thing that pitted us against each other in the first place. Alistair took my hand, not the one wearing a cursed ring, just my hand. And for the first time, the gesture asked for nothing except that I stay.